Next up, we have Thomas Pommier from the City of Houston's Office of Sustainability. Thomas, can we get you to turn your camera? Okay, there we go. Vishal, could you please spotlight Thomas' video, please? Great, phenomenal. Everyone, so I'm going to quickly introduce Thomas, and he will get into his exciting workshop on Houston's Climate Action Plan. So within the Office of Sustainability, Thomas serves as a coordinator for the implementation of the Houston Climate Action Plan. His duties include developing strategic initiatives and coordinating collaborations with corporate and government partners, community organizations, and academia. Prior to joining the Office of Sustainability, Thomas was embedded in the Mayor's Office of Trade and International Affairs, overseeing the World Energy Cities Partnership, an association of 19 leading energy cities across 15 countries that are committed to fostering the transition to a more sustainable energy future. He graduated from Université Paris-Sud XI with a master in political science and is fluent in French, English, Spanish, and Italian. Thank you very much, Thomas, for joining us today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Vaishnav, for the introduction, and congratulating you on your French. That was perfect pronunciation. Thanks. And thanks everyone for being here. To hear this and learn about the Climate Action Plan. Thanks for participating in this Ideathon and in the climate challenge in particular. So I'm gonna try to share my screen in presenter view, so bear with me a second. Okay, are you guys seeing this properly?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay. But you're not seeing the presenter view, right? You're just seeing the PowerPoint.
Yep, we see only the PowerPoint.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to get started right away. And I am going to try to leave time for questions at the end, since the goal here, my understanding is you guys have challenges and questions to answer and ideas to work on. So what I'm going to try to do is give you a snapshot of what the Climate Action Plan is about. I'm sure you guys have read it already, and throughout the presentation, I'm going to try to give you resources as well. So let's get started. Why is Houston taking climate action? Why is it important? And why did we create a climate action plan? I think we all here are all too familiar with the effects of climate change. We've had 3 500-year floods in 3 years, with Hurricane Harvey being the largest rain event in American history. Harvey was larger, slower, and had 40% more rain than it would have had if it had occurred 100 years ago. Summer temperatures are also getting hotter, with longer heat waves that threaten the health of our most vulnerable populations. In August 2020, Dr. Catherine Aho, who's a climate scientist out of the university in Lubbock, released a study showing that if we do nothing, by 2050, the hottest day of the year in Houston, on average, will be 106 degrees, and we can expect 23 days a year over 100 degrees. We could face 55 days of temperatures over 100 degrees per year by 2100, and an average high temperature of 109 degrees, plus heat waves that would last up to 47 days. And that's just the heat. On the precipitation side, we would remain about the same annually, so on average, but the extreme range would increase, right? From 5 inches to 110 inches. meaning that both extreme rain and extreme droughts would be more frequent. So following Harvey, the city of Houston had to act, and that's the Houston Climate Action Plan is part of that response. We needed both strategies to help minimize the city's carbon footprint, but also to help save money and improve quality of life for residents. So again, as I was saying, since this presentation is meant to give you some background and information to help you work on ideas for the climate challenge, I'm going to reference a number of resources I already did with the climate impact assessment. And now I'm going to talk really quickly about a couple organizations that Houston's committed to. And the reason we do that is climate change is a global phenomena. In other words, our climate action locally has a positive impact, not just for us, but for our neighbors and for the planet. And same is true for when our neighbors act on climate, that helps us, right? So we try to collaborate. And the city of Houston is committed at the national level and internationally to collaborate with other cities on climate action. You might have heard recently that Mayor Turner took on the role of chair of an organization called Climate Mayors, which is a bipartisan network of over 470 US mayors committed to upholding the Paris Agreement and working to combat climate change through meaningful action in their communities. On Climate Mayors, you can find information on how we're working with the Biden-Harris administration to accelerate climate action in the US, but also about what other cities are doing. At the international level, Houston is committed to participate in global climate action through the C40. And we were recognized last year as one of 54 of the 96 megacities in C40 that are on track to meet climate action targets. So that's another great resource with lots of information on what cities around the world are doing to lead the way towards healthier and more sustainable future. All right. Now, more specifically about the Houston Climate Action Plan. What is the Houston Climate Action Plan, sorry, which we often refer as the CAP. It's a science-based, community-driven strategy to make Houston's energy systems, transportation networks, building operations, and waste management as clean and efficient as possible. It serves as a roadmap for Houston to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. That's the goal of the Paris Agreement. But Houston also, through the Climate Action Plan, has the ambition to lead the global energy transition. We call ourselves the energy capital of the world. And so we felt that it was important to also recognize our responsibility to really lead on the energy transition specifically. What did I do? Sorry about that. So on the development of the Climate Action Plan, we worked with the C40 and the Houston Advanced Research Center, another great resource here locally, as our technical partners. And we conducted over 30 public town halls, 25 working group meetings, and over 200 one-on-one stakeholder meetings to develop the plan. And the specific goals, strategies, and actions are outlined in the CAP. They also must be community-driven because their implementation will require the support and participation, commitment, innovation from all individuals and organizations throughout the community, including businesses, industry, consumers and regional governments, right? And that's an important distinction. This is the first time we have a climate action plan that is community-wide. So it's not just about making the operations of the city government cleaner and more sustainable. It's really about, as a community, working towards the goal of carbon neutrality. So as I said, ultimately the goal is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, which means we must reduce or offset any carbon dioxide we release into the atmosphere. To do that, we had to understand where our emissions come from and develop emission reduction strategies accordingly. Here on this slide, you can see the baseline we used to develop the climate action plan. That's the baseline greenhouse gas emission inventory from 2014. And that's also what we use to measure progress. You can see that the great majority of our emissions come from energy, almost 50%. And that means the electricity and natural gas that we consume in our buildings or for industrial purposes. And for transportation, again, almost 50%. And those are the gasoline and the diesel that we burn and consume to power our cars, the trucks that deliver foods and products and so on to the city or out to other places, or even that travel across the city, right, from one place to another. If they're traveling from the east side to say Florida, they pass through Houston and they produce emissions that we take into account in our inventory. I think it's important here to point out the climate action plan really is about specifically reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but there are many co-benefits to doing that, including accessibility, affordability, resilience, cost savings, economic growth, improved environmental quality, better health and well-being for residents, as well as workforce development with new jobs being available in new industries, right? The way the CAP is structured, we've taken these 4 different areas of focus areas we call them, that are transportation, energy transition, building optimization, and materials management. So transportation is how we choose to move, walk, bike, public transit, electric vehicles, but also how we plan our city to make it easier for people to choose these different modes of transportation. Oops, sorry. And energy transition is how we produce the energy that we consume. So either a fossil fuel power plant or a solar farm, for example. Building optimization is also part of the 50% energy emissions that we saw earlier. But that's more focused on energy and water efficiencies. So energy efficiency and water conservation. And why water? Because water treatment plants consume a lot of energy. So water conservation is also an energy efficiency. And then materials management, that's reducing our waste through reusing, recycling, composting, so that less of it goes to the landfill, as well as growing the circular economy, right? So that the waste from one activity can be used as a resource for another. And at the bottom, you see that equity bar, and that's there to remind us that across the board, we must ensure that our climate actions leave no one behind. And acting equitably on climate means not only that everyone should benefit, but beyond that, ensuring that communities which suffer disproportionately from climate change and pollution should be prioritized. And that's actually a very important point and something you guys should keep in mind as you reflect on ideas for this climate challenge. I'm going to go fairly quickly on the goals and strategies, pointing the ones that you guys are going to be working on. So on transportation, the number one goal is shifting the regional fleet to electric and low emission vehicles. And we have strategies to do that are increasing commercial and private sector infrastructure and incentives, and converting 100% of our own light duty fleet at the municipality to really lead by example. The second goal is to reduce vehicle miles traveled per capita. That's how much people drive individually. And that involves implementing integrated multimodal transportation system, building and retrofitting complete transit-oriented neighborhoods. That's what I was mentioning earlier, how we plan the city so that it is easier for residents to choose these more sustainable ways of moving around. And the third goal is to provide equitable and safe mobility choices. So it's reducing barriers to using these more sustainable modes of transportation, whether it is safety concerns when you're biking or when you're walking, or even just practicity, having neighborhoods that are built so that things are close enough that you can choose to bike or walk or take the bus, right? On the energy transition, and here I've highlighted the section that you guys have in your climate challenge. The number one goal is to grow investment in renewable and resilient energy system. So supporting, promoting the use of and development of renewable energy, supporting retail renewable energy choices as well, and advocating at the state level, for example, or at the federal level, right? The second goal is to make Houston the leader in carbon capture technology and energy innovation. That's related to what I was mentioning at the very beginning, that going above reducing greenhouse gas emission in the city, Houston feels like it has a responsibility as the energy capital of the world to develop the technologies and scale the technologies that will allow not only us, but the rest of the world as well to move towards this global goal of the Paris Agreement of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. And the last one is to restore and protect and enhance Houston's natural ability to capture and store carbon. That is a little bit different because here we're talking about basically making sure there are enough trees and green spaces in the city to naturally absorb and store part of the carbon that we release through our activities. On building optimization, the goals here are to reduce building energy use and maximize savings. So very clearly energy efficiency focused, expand investment in energy efficiency that's less about the technology, but more so about getting people to actually adopt these technologies that exist to make buildings more efficient. And then optimize building operations through investing in skilled local jobs, which is the part that you guys chose for this climate challenge. And that is realizing that technology is great, but if you don't have people that know how to use that technology, the benefits aren't optimized, right? And that means you can have all of the sensors and the tools at home that should allow you to lower your energy consumption. But if you don't know how to use it at its full capacity, you're not going to reap the full benefits. And so it's also an opportunity for Houston to create jobs by training people to do that. And here we're obviously more talking about commercial buildings and large office buildings.
Tomas, I have a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So what demographics are you guys targeting in terms of the city of Houston? And what's kind of the best way you guys have found to educate people on, these important practices?
I'm not sure what you mean by what demographics.
Right. So are you guys thinking about, reaching
You
out to
mean
people?
specifically for this goal of
Number 3.
optimizing building operations?
Yes, this kind of the job training, workforce training.
I think it's to a great extent, it's working with the companies that own these large properties to educate them about the benefits of doing this. Talking to them about how it's cheaper to train people to optimize the operations of your building than spending tons of money on technology that you don't have somebody trained to use, and so you're not going to reap the full benefits, right? So part of that is that working with industry to convince them that they need to train people. So to some extent, it can be training people that are already in charge of optimizing buildings, but need to be trained to use the newer technologies. But it's also in many cases where there isn't somebody that is in charge of optimizing the operations of the building to create new jobs to do that, right? And so then really the demographic is whoever would be interested in doing these jobs, right? And the work is on creating the job market by working with industry to convince them that they need to look into this and employ people to do that, but also working with our educational institutions to create the offering for training, right? So it's working with, to a great extent, our community colleges, but there are also organizations like SPEAR, the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency, as a resource, which offers a building operator certification. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's very helpful, especially the part that you said about, community centers and SPEAR and community colleges. Perfect. Thank you.
I'm going to wrap it up with this one. Materials management is the last focus area. And here you have one of the goals highlighted in red: reduce waste and transform the circular economy, engaging public on upstream solutions for waste reduction. That's the part that you guys chose for this climate challenge. And then we have other goals about optimizing waste operations and creating power from waste. That's one way we can divert some of our waste to be used to produce something else. So to some extent, it's part of the circular economy. But here it's producing energy specifically. And then ensuring safe and cost-effective long-term disposal capacity, that you can look into the long-range plan from our solid waste department at the city, and that is related to the fact that we monitor our solid waste department monitors the life expectancy of our landfills. And so there is some level of urgency because we are at a point where we have about 30 some years left if we continue as normal, right? And if we don't do anything to reduce the waste that we send to the landfill, we have about 30 some years of life in the landfills that we currently use, at which point they would need to close. They would be at capacity, and we need to find other properties for new landfills, and that's really not something that's easy. That's really not something that is desirable also for communities that might be close to the few locations that are available for something like this. And in all likelihood, we would have to go quite far out of the city to find these locations, which means that it's also extra costs involved in terms of our waste system. The last part of my presentation is really on implementation and where we at. It's just a few notes here I added to give you an idea of all the different resources you can look into. I've mentioned some of them. There are some more here. These are some of the things that we are working on or have already implemented. For example, the 100% renewable energy contract for the city, that's done. We are now running all of our operations on 100% renewable energy. And there are other things that are being carried out as we speak. I mentioned, for example, the long-range solid waste plan to try and find ways of reducing the way that the waste that we send to landfill. Some complementary initiatives also that are outside of the climate action plan and the office I work for, but many other offices are working towards the same goals. Plus partner organizations, if you will, whether they are community based or other levels of government. And here's the list of implementation partners, so you can have a look, and these are all potential resources for the work that you're doing. So with that, I thank you, and I'm going to open it for questions.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Thomas. To our audience, if you guys have any questions related to Thomas' presentation, or even anything that's a part of our challenge, please either put it in the chat or come off of mute. Thomas is an expert in climate change, and he's very well versed with Houston's climate action plan. So, he'll be able to answer any questions you have. So I think we actually had a question here from Miss North. In the chat, her question reads, with materials management, what are you doing to use 3D printing with sensors? Houston Community College has a lab. Are you collaborating with them?
So we are working, there are a lot of organizations throughout the city that are doing a whole lot of different things. And we are, working more closely with some than others. I am not very familiar with 3D printing or how that relates to the waste issue. I assume, Karen, that that the questionnaire is related to potentially collecting plastic waste from other industries that can be transformed into pellets that can be used for 3D printing. Is that what you're, okay. I was trying to piece it together. But yes, and really that's one example of the circular economy. So 3D printing is an application here where there's potential, right, for waste from other activities to be retransformed somehow to be usable as a resource for another, right? So there are companies that will take waste plastic, sorted because there are lots of different types of plastic, and then grind it and so on and so forth to reduce them back to the form of pellets. And those can be used for other industries to make new plastic products, right? And so 3D printing is one application of this, but there are other potential examples.
Great answer, and thanks for tying that into the circular economy, Thomas. We have another question here from Orlando. The question reads, "How can floods get fixed since rain floods a lot of places? Since any rain floods a lot of places in Houston."
Right. So that's an interesting question, and that's an important one, right? There's a distinction to be made between mitigation of climate change, which is what the office I work for does. We try to reduce our impact on climate by reducing greenhouse gas emissions so that these type of extreme weather events happen less often, right? Versus happening more often if we continue to produce more and more greenhouse gas. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen overnight, and that doesn't mean that we're going to completely get rid of extreme weather events. So there is also an office at the city that works on resilience, and they work on adaptation strategies, which are more so geared towards, we know we're going to have flooding. We know at least for the short-term future, we're going to have more extreme weather events, whether it's heat or rain. And how do we adapt to that so that even if they happen, they cause less damage, right? And so that's about improving our infrastructure around drainage. That's improving or raising buildings, for example, so that even if it floods, the buildings don't get flooded and don't get damaged. And it's also on the heat-related aspect, looking at natural solutions, for example, to reduce heat by planting more trees, having more green spaces. It can be also green roofing and other such technologies.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Does anyone else have any questions that they would like Thomas to answer? They can be related to, like I said, the climate change challenge or the climate action plan. I know a bunch of you were asking me a lot of questions, so please use Thomas as a resource. He'd be happy to answer your questions. There we go. We have a question from Alejandra. So the question reads, regarding the transition to clean energy, how would you target lower/middle income communities or help them afford this transition? Great question, Alejandra.
Yeah, again, a great question. And it is a challenge, right? And it relates to equity, which I talked about at some point in the presentation, where we also need to be careful when we look at all these technologies that will allow us to reduce our emissions. how do we make them available and affordable to everyone, right? That's sometimes a challenge. I'm thinking about having solar panels on your roof, for example, right? That is available right now. It's a great solution, and it can help you reduce your energy costs at home, right? But the upfront cost oftentimes is high, and not everybody can have solar panels on their roof because your roof needs to be in good state to be able to support the solar panels, right? So there are low-income communities where there needs to be some work done on the house before you can put solar panels, and all that makes it harder and more difficult. There are ways we are working on this. Currently, an organization we work with called Solar United Neighbors is running a campaign to sort of aggregate and make the cost of solar cheaper. So they go and educate people about the technology, about the advantages, how it works, how you can take advantage of it, and the potential reduction on your energy bill. And then people sign up, and with a group of people signing up together and choosing a vendor together, it reduces the cost, right, per individual. They are trying to also work with foundations and other organizations to find funding to fund these types of projects for low-income households. So that's one example. Another great example currently is the solar farm that we are working with the private sector to build on the Sunnyside landfill. And so that's a project where there was a landfill in an underserved community of Sunnyside back in the 50s, I believe. And the community fought it, and in the 70s it was closed down. But back then the regulations were different, it wasn't capped. Anyway, it's a bit of an environmental disaster. It's long past, right? The emissions from these landfill are probably all gone. But still, you're left with a large property that cannot easily be redeveloped because there are concerns over environmental issues, right? So there are government institutions, in particular TCEQ, that will not let you do anything with that kind of property because they're concerned that if you dig it up, you can potentially dig up some nefarious gases or other environmentally problematic substances, right? One of the few things that you can do with a property like that is put a solar farm on it. And so that's the project that the community elected. And this is moving forward, and we're happy to see that happen.
Great. Well, unfortunately, guys, we don't have much more time with Thomas. So Thomas, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us and sharing all this information about the climate action plan with our students. I'm getting chats, direct messages letting me know how useful the workshop was. So once again, thank you very much. And if you guys would like to say thank you in the chat, please go ahead and do that. So we'll hand it off to Usman, who's going to introduce our next workshops. Again, thank you very much, Thomas. We appreciate your time.
Thank you all. Looking forward to hearing the ideas. Bye-bye.